part 2 in the tool series. This is part 2 of 3. The first part, I went over pliers and other handheld tools. In this particular video, part 2, I'm going to go over ratchets and some sockets. And then in part 3, I'm going to review wrenches. There are a ton of options out there pertaining to ratchets. What might serve you best, and I even in the particular video I've included a couple breaker bars in there. What might serve you best for what you are doing? So I'm going to go, and I'm actually going to start with the breaker bars, and I'll get into the extensions here in just a minute. Breaker bars are nice. I've never been a huge fan of them. I just happen to have some. So breaker bars are nice. Next, I really like long-handled ratchets for numerous reasons, but I like long-handed flex head ratchets, so where the head flexes up and down. Now, in this particular case, this is a Craftsman, and this is a Snap-on. This Craftsman I bought probably 8 or 9 years ago. I've gotten a lot of good service out of it, no problem whatsoever. Have nothing to complain about, as it is an old style lower tooth head. I don't know what it is. And what I mean by lower tooth head, and you'll hear me talk about it numerous times in the video, listen to the clicks. Now, if I pick up the Snap-on right here, so there's more gear teeth in this head than there are this head, which basically the swing arc of the handle is going to be smaller. So if you're in one of those really tight spots, more teeth is better. That's not to say more teeth is always perfect, because as I get into some of the newer Craftsman stuff, I'll explain that. But I really like long-handled flex head ratchets. It allows you to get into tight places, say a little bit of an angle. In this particular case, this is a non-locking head, but it does have a detente ball in it, so you can see where the ball stops. Meanwhile, this is a locking flex head, so in other words, the head won't pivot unless you pull this back, and then it will lock in numerous ways. And you can leave it open like that. Oh, it's pushed off to the side. Now, there is a ginormous cost difference between these two ratchets. This one right here is well over $200. This is one of the few Snap-on tools that I bought new, only because my family wanted me to purchase something for a holiday, and this is what I chose. Meanwhile, this Craftsman is going to be generally less than 40 bucks. So I don't think there's a Craftsman that is a 24-inch handle. This is a 18-inch handle from what I remember. I don't think that there is a Craftsman that has a 24-inch handle other than a breaker bar. Now, one really good way to get into nicer tools without spending a lot of money is to go for these older Snap-on ratchets. So this is an older Snap-on ratchet. It's one that I actually rebuilt. You can buy the rebuild kits from Snap-on, or if you have a Snap-on dealer, they'll give you the rebuild kits. Really like it. These are probably my go-to ratchet. I also have this Craftsman ratchet. Once again, not necessarily a fine tooth head. This ratchet, the mechanism is getting pretty worn out. You can tell it's got some some play in there, and so it is a little bit older. And then this is probably one of my newest. Actually, this is my newest Craftsman ratchet, and this is a 75 tooth Craftsman. I have no real complaints on this one other than it's extremely heavy for what it is. I don't know if this handle, I like the thin form and everything, but I just think it's a little heavier. I threw this one in just for posterity's sake. This is a very old Snap-on ratchet. I do use it from time to time. I did rebuild it. So really like that, just to for posterity's sake. But you can get any, I think you can normally pick these up for $20 or less. You can pick these up at auction or from off of Facebook or something for normally $40 or less, if not, $30 or $20 or $30. This one I think is in the mid $30, maybe $40 range. And this is just kind of the cool factor. You can typically pick those up pretty cheap for those older vintage ratchets. Now I'm going to go ahead and get into the 3/8 ratchets because I think a 1/2 inch is really good for those hard to turn nuts and bolts. But preferentially, I think of all the ratchets I have, these are my two favorite that I use the most. So this is a long-handled Craftsman fixed head. It is, I think I've had this one probably 10 or 15 years. Really like it. I haven't worn it out yet. And then this is a recent purchase. This is a snap-on, much like flex head, just like that one right there. High gear to high number of teeth. I really like this ratchet. I'll switch back and forth between those two unless I particularly need an angle. If you, once again, kind of that vintage style, this is a very old, I can't remember the year. I knew it one time. I think it's from it's not very old. I think it's from the 60s or 70s snap-on. Once again, I rebuilt this one. And this is a newer snap-on, just, it is a higher tooth head on it. And then this is where we get into disappointment. So, had this ratchet for I don't know how many years. You can typically buy them. It's Craftsman. You can typically buy them for less than 20 bucks. Get a lot of service life out of them, or I used to. I haven't actually bought any of this style in a while. And then we have this one. So this is a 75 tooth, much like this 1/2 inch variety. This is just a 3/8. And this is kind of where I first noticed that I started to get away from Craftsman tools. If you look and you see how much that wiggles, that is probably this ratchet I've had less than 2 years, and more or less it's worn out. It is just flat worn out. It did not start like that. That is something that happened over time. It does not grab sometimes when you put a lot of force on it. I'm just really unimpressed, and the only reason I keep it around is to show people. I think I got less than a year of service out of that particular ratchet. Meanwhile, some of these older ones are just fine. So, 3/8 are probably the most popular for most folks to get into. And I would say that, something along this line or this line right there, kind of like I said, I really like the snap-ons for ratchets. But you can go with whatever brand you want. I just don't know about these new higher tooth Craftsman ratchets. I'm just not a big fan of them. I've tried a couple. This one seems to be holding up fine, but this one I've been unimpressed with. And then we get into a 1/4 inch. I've got a couple different 1/4 inches. They're a little bit lower tooth number for gears. Had those a while, and then we have our traditional Craftsman, so on and so forth. So I do like higher quality ratchets. That is kind of one pet peeve of mine. If you can't tell, I've got a number of snap-ons. I've also got a number of Craftsman. And that's not to say that Cobalt and Husky aren't good either. I've always kind of preferentially gone for the Craftsman. And then recently, in about the last 4 years, I've started buying more snap-on. For instance, and I know I told you I bought this one and this one new. All the other snap-ons I've either purchased online or I've purchased at an auction. And I've got many, many more of them over here. It's really kind of hard for me to say no at an auction sometimes. So I have lots of different snap-ons. Really like them. Kind of collect them for lack of a better term. So really like higher quality ratchets. I have not tried the Icon line from Harbor Freight. I will be bluntly honest. Harbor Freight, I have bought a couple things from Harbor Freight several years ago. One of them was a 20-ton jack that pretty much scared me away from buying anything from Harbor Freight ever again. pretty much anything, and I know this is not the experience for most folks, but pretty much anything I have ever bought from Harbor Freight, aside from rubber mallets and utility knives, has either bent, died, broken, almost caused me an injury, numerous problems. You're gonna have to really convince me to buy anything of theirs. But back to that 20-ton jack, I bought that 20-ton hydraulic jack back when I had my John Deere 820. I had it up in the air one evening, putting some blocks underneath it, and the jack failed while I was putting blocks underneath it. An oil seal failed or something inside. I mean, I was in no danger because I had blocks underneath the tractor, but I have not bought anything at Harbor Freight ever since then. I know, like I said, a lot of people have really good luck with it, and I have not tried their Icon line of tools. But when you have a 10,000-pound tractor over your head and one of their Pittsburgh 20-ton jacks, because I didn't think you could screw up a hydraulic jack, busts, and the tractor almost comes down your head, it's not an exciting experience. And that goes to show you why safety is important. So I like good quality ratchets. Now, sockets, on the other hand, I have no problem with whatever brand socket. I have yet to really, I have worn out many sockets, as I would expect to. Particularly, I've worn out a lot of 10 millimeter and 7/16 and half-inch sockets. But I've generally found if it's a decent quality socket, so Craftsman, Cobalt, Husky, Snap-on, Mac, any of those companies, and I realize some are more expensive than the others, they are perfectly fine and serviceable. I have many different types of sockets around here, and I have no problem with whatever socket is out there. And just a really quick note, the one thing I would recommend for anyone, get an extension kit. You can generally get like a whole box of extensions. So for instance, many years ago, and I had yet to actually take it out of the plastic, I bought that. It's a 20 actually probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or so. This is a 20-piece accessory set. It was on sale on Black Friday or something. I just grabbed it because I think it was like for 20 bucks or something. I don't know if Craftsman still sells these or not, but they might. But I think the extensions and universal joints and stuff like that are pretty handy to have when you were working with machines like I do. So these are probably my most used extensions. I have the nice 12-inch extensions, and then I use these two 3/8 extensions, and I'll use this one 1/2-inch extension. And then other than that, you can get deep well and shallow sockets. One thing I would say about sockets is pay attention 6-point, 12-point. 12-point sockets I tend to like a little bit better unless it's a very stubborn bolt, in which case then you're going to want a 6-point. But I think if I only had one to pick, I would probably buy 12-point sockets. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, 6-point, 12-point, and naturally I can't find a 12, oh, here we go. So 6-point versus 12-point. So look at these two sockets right here. This one has a 6-sided, that's 12-sided, or 12 points on it. Like I said, the 12-point will generally work just fine, but the 6-point works really well. If you need to get in there and really break something loose, I would prefer the 6-point. And most impact sockets are 6-point versus most chrome sockets you can find both 12 and 6-point. So just something to think about. So hopefully this video was helpful, explained a couple of my thoughts on ratchets and sockets. To kind of hit the highlights again, I really like good quality ratchets. I mean, you use a ratchet all the time. You use sockets once in a while. And I think really any good brand of socket is perfectly fine. So thanks for watching.